Cool. Well, I'm Bob, and this is Dave. We kind of a little bit of our story. We originally built the original prototype that was called Gov Pulse for a Summit Labs contest, getting close to 2 years ago, I guess. And it was just sort of bulk XML feeds had just been kind of, actually we weren't even in XML then. Data.gov had just launched, so it was sort of a promotion of that. Later, September, October, bulk XML was released. So we started building GovPulse without the bulk data, and then we got bulk XML, and built just GovPulse.us. It was just really trying to sort of a re-envision of what the sort of Federal Register type of was like. Because we looked at it and went, huh, never heard of this stuff before, but there's a lot of really important stuff in here. That's a problem. So we built that, and then we got a call from Office of the Federal Register, sort of January. They were like, hey, we see your site, it looks really cool. We're talking about redoing our site. Would you be interested in partnering with us to kind of help us with that? And it took a number of months, I think, for that all to sort of play out, get to where we wanted to be, and we ended up starting work on FR2 last April, May. And needed to have the site launched by July 26th, which was the 75th anniversary. So we had just about 3 months to build out the new site.
So that's only like a new look then, right?
We started with the GovPulse code base, but we actually put in, it was almost like building a new site. There were a number of things with the data that we didn't understand when we started building, because you have this giant data file. It was really hard to know what was in there and what things meant.
Inevitably, there's some fields you're like, I'm just going to ignore this. I don't know what this does.
Yeah, and we're finding out now they mean things.
I put it in the database, and I can come up with names for them. I'm like, unknown field 4. And someday I name that column something.
Yeah, so there was that whole problem where we realized we did things wrong, or that we thought only one agency released a regulation. It turns out agencies often collaborate. 3 agencies release regulation. So we ended up, it was a lot of work to go from what we had as a prototype that seems very similar, but into something that was really robust and that a government agency would be comfortable putting out there in public. For me, and I think for the rest of it, was really interesting that working with a federal agency that has a mandate, a legal mandate to do certain things, is very different than me as a developer who just builds things and puts them out there and goes, oh, if it's a little inaccurate, that's fine. I'll come back and fix it later. So it was an interesting sort of paradigm shift that they were very open to change, very much wanted to do new things, but it was also, we need to make sure we do it right. So Dave, if you want to show maybe a quick walkthrough of...
Yeah, I'll start at the beginning where I had these. So this is the official version right now. It's still the place to go for, you know, the real version of Federal Register is this.
Do you have a date when this is going to be legal?
No, but we can talk about that. It's super interesting.
Because I'm very excited about that.
Yes, us too.
Is this data as normalized as it looks? I mean, it looks pretty consistent.
Well,
does that always have that many hyphens acting as a break and that sort of thing?
I don't know. We import directly from the bulk XML feed. This is the ASCII, just like the plain text version of full stream. They also provide a PDF.
So you don't have to do anything with this.
Correct. But this is what people would read. Like,
Actually,
really nice.
It would look even worse.
Yeah.
Because it was like columns and stuff.
Yeah, and like here, there's like a table in here that's, you know, it's just sort of that. The PDF, this is sort of a huge document, but, oops.
Probably the way most people read this right now is the PDF.
Oh, come on.
It's the official version as a current. And kind of to answer your question for official, we'll do. Yeah, re-logged in. We are working to move towards making FR 2.0 the official Federal Register site. Legal, right now we have legal disclaimers on the site saying, hey, we're pretty sure this is accurate, but we're not officially legal. So we're moving towards that. It's definitely a process. We need to verify that the data we're getting is the accurate data. Basically the way the Federal Register works right now is that it starts with agencies submitting documents to GPO, FDSys, Government Printing Office, Federal Digital System Management. That eventually gets turned into some sort of structure that I've never seen that goes off to the printers. they actually print it and then take that. It's an SGML that gets translated into the XML when it comes back into GPL, and then they eventually release the bulk data as XML, and that usually happens within a few hours. That happens over the course of the night. We import the data, and it's on the site, ideally by about 6 a.m., but depending if there's issues at the plant where we print and that sort of stuff. Sometimes it can be a little bit later. So the only official one is the PDF. That's the legal document that you would take to court. So we are moving towards becoming official, and there's a number of steps that are involved in that.
And even that process that you just outlined is like months worth of figuring stuff out. Like talking with them about it, like they kind of know some of, like most of this process, but we recently ran into some issues where there's images embedded in these PDFs. We, our other co-developer, made like a library to rip them out of the PDFs and like know what page it was from. But we want the real deal, right? And figuring that out was crazy. I mean, like everybody had to start talking to each other for the first time. You know, it's like this DOS program that we have to run now, like to de-scrunch these files that like come out of the print, you know, the printing shop that like nobody like had talked to them or like knew this process. So,
and you're talking about multiple shifts, and that's part of the problem. It starts with a day shift, it moves into a night shift that does printing, gets moved back to a day shift. And so there's a lot of things that we look at and go, why isn't this just right? But it's actually a larger problem than it often appears.
Collaboration across.
So where's the new page?
So this is GovPulse. We're not really going to talk about this too much, but this is just making the ASCII version better. You know, you can read this. And we did a bunch of other cool things for finding stuff, but the real reason we're here is this. And so I've been showing the same article over and over again. The table of contents is just always going to be a huge pain, but you know, tables are now real tables, even though they're sort of crazy looking tables. But
how do you handle anchors?
oh,
What's the fragment?
so we have paragraph level citation implemented. So throughout the document we have data attributes that tell you what page you're on in the document and what paragraph you're on, and you can click here and get a link to this particular citation, the page. You can the New York Times does this, which I was super excited about. Somebody there figured out how to do all this because we don't really have like a tutorial or anything.
And does your linking paragraph, is the anchor itself a paragraph citation?
Yes. So if you click here, it'll do this sort of silly example.
Well, it's numbered. It's P15. So it's a 15
Yeah.
paragraph.
So the way we do it is we're using HTML5 in the background, and we just count the paragraphs as we go through, because there's no like way of knowing otherwise what it is.
But we do have the page numbers embedded as well, which is super helpful. So data page equals 24292. So we're just sort of adding, and we're layering on a bunch of data on top, such as links to other Federal Register articles, links to the Code of Federal Regulations, patent numbers, U.S. code citations. I would like to get to doing like species names and random stuff like that, but it's like not super important.
Is that all that? Are you limited in what you can link to?
That has come up.
Like, can you, for species names, are you gonna link to like a
Right.
Wikipedia
Like the
page
species?
on the species?
Is that what the new? Remember the Wikimedia Foundation has like the page for the entry for every species?
They have
project?
Wiki species.
Is that what
Yeah.
species?
Yeah.
I would hope to use that, and then there's things like chemical names or something like that, which would be, you know, all this like layering on top, which would be really helpful, but it has to be pretty accurate, and we have to sort of guarantee this sort of thing. And same with like GovPulse had location search, which is huge, very cool to see what's happening like around you. We don't have that on this site because we're just feeding it through, and you know, we have like a confidence level. So
So kind of the backup, to be clear, we're just contractors. So we're not representing the Federal Register in that sort of, in any capacity there. But they are very open to new ideas and very much want to try new things and really want their content to be usable to the public. And so part of what we want to gather from this conversation here is what sorts of ideas, what are we missing, what can we do better? Like, are there visualizations we can do? Like, we really kind of want to get to that step where we're not just re-implementing something in a nicer form, but we want to make it more usable. We want to make it easier to search. And so feel free at any point to be like.
So the biggest thing, and I can kind of guess this is not your members of the public should be able to comment here.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like that can't be stated enough to the federal government, that their convoluted, crazy-ass system is totally unacceptable. And if you're asking for comments here, I should be able to comment here. I've actually gotten into loops where I've gone, I don't even know, regulations.gov.
Yep.
Okay, so regulations.gov just needs to fold it.
Oh my gosh.
But so I've gotten into a loop where and for my own agency, for the National Archives, where it says comment below or comment online, and then it like sends me to some other thing, and then it says comment online, and I can never comment online.
I just did that here. I clicked submit a formal comment from to the addresses section, because if we don't have because we're sort of sneaky and we steal the link off regulations.gov.
Good for you.
Yeah. They know
to make it easy. Yeah, they know it now.
They didn't know in the beginning.
So I mean, we do it when we can, but those links are crazy. It's built on Google Web Toolkit. It's like this huge.
I've been writing scripts for regulations.gov.
Yeah, all right. We have a gem for decoding their crazy GWTs.
Yeah, so Andrew, the third developer, built, it's on GitHub, it's called GWT underscore RPC, I think.
Okay.
I'll give you a link for it.
Yeah,
And basically he's decoded, he hasn't done it for the whole site, but essentially figured out how Google Web Toolkit works, which they just sent back a bunch of they essentially insert references back and forth in this stream, and it's really annoying, but he wrote a gem that basically makes it a lot easier. Once you know you're looking at a particular page, you can decipher it and then just use a gem to keep going back. So we don't scrape, we actually go in and figure out the links based on the weird output they're sending back.
Yeah. My work so far has mostly been a scraper built on Selenium that like runs Firefox processes.
Yeah. So for everyone else, the regulations.gov, the way this sort of works is regulations.gov was tasked, they're part of the EPA. And they were tasked sometime in 2000 something with basically being the online repository for official comments on the Federal Register. So they're the ones with the official mandate to collect comments. So even though the Office of the Federal Register is tasked with producing the Federal Register, they're not tasked with collecting the comments. So it's sort of this system that we don't have a lot of influence over right now, and I would love to see the public more and more go, hey, why are you wasting money and doing this?
I think the public can't even understand the system. I mean, it took me forever to figure out that you got to go to regulations.gov to submit a comment, and then you go there and you can't figure out how to submit a comment, or.
And even then, it's like for most agencies, but there's some small subset that like non-participating agencies who have their own systems.
And there's still letters need to be written and stuff, like not all of it's online at all.
So one of the things one thing we have thought about doing, we don't know if we're even going to be allowed to do this, would be to pull the comments back out of regulations.gov
Post
and present them. You would still have to comment over there. We don't know, there's a lot of politics internally that would probably go on around this, but we would love to be able to present the comments on the site. And so as we look towards the future, that's a really good suggestion that we kind of find ways to, because it is hard to comment on a regulation in a vacuum and not know.
And I think what people kind of don't understand is the Federal Register came about in the 30s because the government was passing so many laws and regulations. FDR was creating agencies left and right, and that there was this outrage that the public didn't know what laws were being passed by regulations. And so we created the Federal Register. It is an open government, like it was intended to be open government, but the problem is that it's still not completely fixed. Like this whole system.
You see that the technology at the time was hard copy.
Right.
So it was like, oh, okay, well basically it's just a collection of legal notices. So rather than have each agency, have a million little federal registers, put them all in one. Makes sense. And but it's almost like when they started making automobiles, they used wooden carriages, horse carriages, and they put engines in them. So you guys are, yes, it's better than a horse-drawn carriage, but we need to, and it may be a bridge to the next thing, but at some point you have to go, you know what? The best thing we could do is not try to make this wooden carriage any better, even though we got the technology to drop an engine into a bigger engine, but because basically you're building on a model that needs to be, you need to go from wood to metal, and then we can really have a nice car then, but it's just being held back by the fact that you've got, yes, the Federal Register or the National Archives is in charge of this part, and the UK is in charge of the comments, plus it's just regulations, it's not projects.
There's some announcements. There's like meeting announcements, any STACA, anything, grants. It is more than regulations.
But it's still
to the event.
It's only the number of public notices. There's a lot of stuff that's going on, certainly. But the number of public notices, I know working for the federal government, that's covered on the Federal Register is like 2% of all public notices for stuff that's for request for comment. It's only 2%. Oh yeah, it looks like a lot, but it's like, and most of the stuff is not a regulation. The people are interested in it. It's not a regulation. It's the bridge that down the road. You know, that's
right, and
that's what's not on. So you can be the most excellent 2% and be, you know, and people will still be not getting the ones that they're interested in. So, and then it's not your. I'm pointing out the limitations of the model that you have to work with.
And as open government people, I mean, we still run GovPulse. It's kind of running itself at this point, but we're thinking about different uses for it, because we essentially, what we built at GovPulse.us has become Federal Register, and now we want to kind of re-envision what that could look like. And sort of, a lot of what we try to do is build things that say, hey, look, this works, let us go ahead and do it officially. And that seems to have been a model that's at least worked in our experience, that often government agencies are afraid of just jumping out and trying something completely new. And as we take those steps, so we've thought about re-envisioning GovPulse, and that's a good comment on what we might do with that. Speaking of the event search, one area that we'd love to have some comment on and thought around is this idea. So we've got multiple different sorts of searches on FederalRegister.gov. We've got just typical article search, which is kind of what you would expect with a lot of advanced features that we rolled out a few months ago. Then you have this idea of events, so that whether it's like there's grants, there's these notices of various things, there's notices of public meetings, and one of the things that we're starting to come back around, this is something we put into the site when we launched, so, and we didn't have a lot of time to think about this and design this. We're sort of coming back to that as we've got a lot of the other parts of the site a little bit more mature. We're kind of thinking about, well, how do you deal with helping the public understand that there are public meetings that they can attend? A lot of these things are online. Like you can just dial in or log in somewhere and talk about these things. But what is it? It's sort of lost in the context of this larger thing, and we don't have all the best ideas on how to really make this relevant to the public. So I'd love to, whether it's here or over email later or whatever, I'd love to hear some thoughts about is that useful to people? Do people want to go to public meetings?
And part of the challenge that we have is that some of these aren't marked up as meetings. Some of them are and some of them aren't, and there's a lot of them are not. So we either have our poor human editor try and read through every single article that's published every day and like pick out like what might be a meeting. Or we try and help them too. It's like, you know, like try and be a little bit smart about it, but it's not working. We either need the agencies to start marking things out better, like just have more machine readable data, which would be great, that's ideal, or we need to like crowdsource or just sort of show this stuff, you know, just sort of expose it much better than we have. And like even the search, I mean, it was all old. I mean, like what happened? There's no way the last public meeting was in January 24th. You know what I mean? I mean, this is from 2031. Like, how is this possible?
I love that.
We're planning.
What in the world is wrong with this?
Don't say they didn't give you enough advance notice.
If you do a search on regulations.gov for public comments and don't supply and search term, and we'll just give you all of them. And then if you sort that by date sending, you get like all of these comments that were supposedly submitted in like 1902 via email. All right. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, it says the effective date is August 1st, 2031. Is that real?
That's the whole thing.
Yeah, and I mean, this is a whole nother issue too, where it's like.
Is there some sort of calendar where you could see, like, here's all the public events, not just like for that category or anything, and for all events? Here's what's happening on that day.
That's
I'm in
good.
DC on this day. I want to see what's going on.
Yeah, there isn't. That's a great suggestion. One of the things we struggle with is that there tend to be a lot of events on a given day, and
How to display that.
how to display that and given facilities for like filtering that and understanding. Well, no, I don't actually want to go in. I just want to call. Like, I'm not actually in DC this day, but I am next week. So, so that's a great suggestion just in terms of calendar.
The actual calendar view.
So,
Looks like a calendar.
yeah, it looks like a
Yeah,
calendar.
right.
And you just
Instead of
it
a
doesn't have
list,
to, like,
like a
be
table.
like it doesn't have to. You could like click from the calendar to the table. You know?
Right. Yeah.
I'll be alright.
Do you do any microformatting with HCal or anything like that?
Thought about it and wanted to. Again, it's a markup issue.
We do have.
If you guys have suggestions about, often there's like for further information, here's an address and a name and a phone number, but it's not marked up. It's in a giant address block, and often there's other text in there. So if you guys have suggestions about
On the regulations here, we have each cards at least. Or
on the
cards.
regulation, yeah.
Like there's the notion of you can view like the package of articles that relate to a given regulation, and oftentimes there's real contact information and it's marked up as such. So like we do it when we can, and when it's admittedly when it's more easy than trying to parse through like a bunch of garbage data. Because again, it has to be like accurate, and if it's not accurate, then it's not worth doing.
But if you do have suggestions on how to parse addresses and phone numbers and stuff out of blocks of text, I would love to hear.
Yeah, so like this, addresses has some addresses in them, or the contact information has like a name in it, but it's not marked up this way. Like it's real fuzzy. And I mean, if we had like a team of editors or something that were
Submitted, like,
Yeah,
from
they
the
are.
agency
Yep.
perspective, they're submitted like Word documents.
Yes, they are.
And then
Yep.
I've done one of these. And then
Oh,
it goes,
you've done one?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So,
Cool.
So there was like there wasn't a template. It was like, and it was for a meeting announcement, and for a fact, it wasn't FACA, but anyway, and we had to follow exactly what we had done before, and then it went up actually within the office I'm in now to someone to approve it, and then it went to the Federal Register, and it's all like a Word document. There was no like good, template, like an online form would be great. You could create, the fields that you needed.
I'm pulling up the
It's kind
handbook
of
for drafting documents.
Yeah, it's kind of like this
Pretty
crazy
intense.
art, like.
Yeah.
Something you might try with figuring out what is and isn't address data is to have pretty loose regex, and then from the output of that, you can just run through a USPS like a zip code lookup if you have zip codes, or just a gazetteer to see if it's a valid city and state, and that gets you 90% of the there.
Right on.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, this is just a general question that I might have. Is it worthwhile to make machine readable even just zip codes? Like this is a zip code and this is probably an address. Like maybe not associate the name in there, but at the very least, every document we can just have zip codes.
I think that sort of thing is useful not because people will use it, but because you have no idea if it's
Right.
useful to people.
Absolutely.
And I just think of the people who were running the Federal Register website a few years ago who had no idea what was useful, and you would say, what is wrong with you? How would you not know that this was useful?
Right.
So I think that sort of thing ends up in that department.
You're just providing power.
I mean, from our perspective, I see you guys have XML links on
Yes.
all your pages. I would be much more likely to use the site consuming it in that way. Like, if you're through some automated tool, and like the more structured data you can give me about what the text is, the better. Like zip codes, whatever. Like that increases the number of analyses that we can build in. So that's
Cool. And would you be interested in like some of the stuff is stuff we're inferring? So the XML that we're providing right now is actually it's just the piece of XML out of the old data. So it's really actually isn't different than what they're providing in there. But we also have the ability, if people would find it useful, is to add in other pieces of data here. Because we break out a number of things that aren't necessarily in it that our regulation view is kind of an enhanced view. We add in the links to the US code because we've gone off and found them and figure out how to link those things together. That's not in the XML. So we could possibly provide another XML thing that would, if that data is useful.
yeah. I mean,
If it were okay, you know, this is one of those touchy subjects because if we modify the XML, then it has to be reviewed again, or you know,
So it might be a supplemental document
okay.
We're not like messing with the rules and regulations of the United States. You know?
Right.
With some dudes like
They'll take you to
changing
court.
stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have any concrete plans for doing stuff. We're doing work with comments, but not with registry itself right now. So I don't have specific requests in that way, but definitely, yeah, more continuous.
Yeah, we would absolutely love to do it, and I think that maybe offering a supplemental that you can overlay on top would be a route that we can take and not step on too many toes, or make it take like 6 months to actually get out the door.
Right, or call it a developer API.
Yeah, there we go. Exactly. Exactly. Well, I mean, even offering an API for these sort of things,
Yeah.
like, we don't know if it would be super useful, but it would be easy, you know, just to say, do you want this document? And here you go. And what version, what format do you want it?
And that's like what I found to be so baffling about Regulations.gov. Like, obviously they have all this structured data, and like the programmers who built it seem to be, you know, reasonably competent. It's this big, complex, fancy thing, and
It's a technology thing because they are using Google Web Toolkit.
Yeah.
They're on 6-month release cycles.
Uh-huh.
So we had asked for an RSS feed at one point before we started working with Federal Register. I had a phone call with them, and for them, like the idea of adding the RSS feed was just going to be really difficult. Like they could do it, but it was going to be in a release 6 months from now. And it's like, well, we don't really want to wait that long. Sure, we'll spider you, I guess.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking for myself here, but it wasn't. I never really felt like a super positive conversation like until lately with those folks. Like it was. It sounds like it's hard work there.
But certainly, like, Regulations.gov as compared to, I don't know, there was just a release of this, like, federal contractor misconduct database that a bunch of people outside my wrote really scathing articles about how, like, it was, like, the worst government website. Like,
Oh, that would be awesome.
Yeah.
It was hilarious.
It was this terrible, terrible website. Like, compared to that, like, Regulations.gov, and, like, these people seem to kind of know what they're doing. Like,
I mean, I think given what they have,
Yeah.
given when they started,
yeah.
I think they've done what they know how to do and what is getting. I don't think they've built something way better than what was there before.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they are limited a bit by the technology percent. Joe, I'm curious. You mentioned that you guys link back to the regulations. Like, how did you find out about the new site?
I believe we either had seen an announcement, probably coming out of the Sunlight, the app.
Okay.
Either that or and you guys are, you do a search on Federal Register. And I think do you beat the GPO site or
Not yet.
Not yet,
We're
but you're still up there.
Yeah, we're underneath.
And that's one of the things that we want to really do is kind of do outreach into other. We're not sure how to do this, and we're not familiar with a lot of the politics that sort of goes on between agencies and stuff. Because we live on the West Coast, and
So wait,
we're almost never exposed to it.
so with the FedSys system that's coming in, how does FederalRegister.gov fit into that system? Because right now they're still pointing to the ASCII versions of all that other stuff. What happens in the next?
That's a good question. FDSys right now is they're being run by, as I understand it, I could be a little off in some of this, but as I understand it, they're being run by the government printing office. Office of Federal Register is technically running FederalRegister.gov. They're obviously very interreliant because the two have always worked together. Like, you got to publish a Federal Register, it's got to be printed. So right now, FDSys points to the official So they're, I think on record, that's where the official version, the official online version of Federal Register lives is in the PDFs and the ASCII versions. I think ASCII is official, but don't quote me on that. I know the PDF is for certain. You might know better.
All right.
It's more official than
You've hit my limit of knowledge.
Gotcha. So, yeah, so that's still, I think if we can become the site of record as the official one, then we'll see that hopefully kind of grow a little bit. But I'm curious how we reach out to other, either agencies in the government or like New York Times is actually starting to use the paragraph level links in some of their articles, which we think is really cool. Like when someone publishes, because these regulations are still really hard to read. As pretty as we can make them, they're still legal documents that I don't even understand. Like the taking of animals. So what is the taking of it? Oh, it means to kill an animal. And I was like, oh, I had to go like read it, look that up, and like it was this whole paragraph that I had to go decipher to even understand that they were talking about accidentally killing some animals when they dredged a channel to build something. And it was like, oh,
or acceptable numbers of killed animals.
But is there an official keeper of those definitions in the code or elsewhere that you can just parse through and populate that with little jQuery pop-ups?
We have a glossary.
Yep. And each time the federal regulation, for instance, gets proposed, if it's a special term that you wouldn't find in the regular dictionary, it's supposed to be defined right then and there, right in the very beginning.
okay.
But taking, sometimes you use the word so much, and maybe your wife has heard you say it so much, she even knows what you're talking about. But the neighbors
Right.
use it so much. It sounds like an English word. Okay. You know, it's not like pre-application review or something like that. We're going, what does that mean? So it can be tricky, even amongst the words that taking. But otherwise, they are supposed to. So that should have been. If it was something not found in the dictionary, I don't know. Maybe that would have been the taking. Maybe it would have fallen under there. Yeah. But if it's not, then it is supposed to be in every single in there, not some master, because a bureaucrat in one agency might call it something, might call it something else. So
There's still the trick of context. A taking means one thing when talking about eminent domain.
Right.
Something very different when we're talking about hunting. So context is, I mentioned just because I just did this for the state code of Virginia over the past month. I have a dictionary of every term that when you look at a section of the code, any word that's defined in that section, chapter, title, or in the code, and it's hierarchical, you get a definition. And it is easy to return technically accurate but actually useless definitions.
And how did you go about doing that in a way that's useful? Like how were you?
Easy. The sections of the code that provide definitions are titled definitions. And it's a series of definitions with a word being defined in quotes. And then there could, sometimes it's a listing of words, sometimes it's just one. And there's, I think, 3 or 4 possible terms that they use as the connective tissue between the word and the definition. Like taking is defined as, and then you get the definition. So I store all of that, and then when somebody pulls up a particular section, for that, I get a listing from the database of all of the words defined for that section, all the words defined for that chapter, and all for that title, and then the generic terms for the code. And then I just do regex, look up and match them, and insert some of the title tip, basically. And then I use jQuery to convert it. But it's pretty easy, but the result, though, is that otherwise you really convoluted into a section of the code and figure out, okay, so what does this word mean here? What does this word mean here? And the definitions for those could be found in widely disparate sections of the code. But to be able to automate that when it works well, which is 99% of the time, it's when it works badly, it's really confusing. So there'd be that significant catch for you guys. This is something I do on my own for fun. But if you go defining person as potentially including a corporation, when it's a regulation that's about hunting, well, the corporation doesn't hunt. So we just confuse people and money.
Yeah, that's a good point. And we'll have to figure those things out going forward, like what an enhanced version means versus an official legal version. But that's an interesting thing. So yeah, we've been trying to promote. We want to figure out how to promote like agencies and the New York Times and to link back to these documents and say, well, when we're reporting about this, I think if you guys are familiar with Document Lab, they've done an incredible job with like allowing reporters to link back to their source documents. So when I'm talking about this, VA hospital abusing people, I'm going to link to my source documents that you can verify. And we kind of want to figure out how to do that with the Federal Register as well, that when the New York Times writes about an upcoming health regulation, that they can refer back to the paragraph that they're getting this information from. The other flip side of that is what we've talked about is how do we then link from the Federal Register document back out to the New York Times article and the Washington Post article. There's legal issues. Thanks. There's legal issues there. Again, it's like there's that official versus enhanced. But it are other ways to make these documents more readable by utilizing the larger ecosphere of people who are writing about this.
Feelings and politics at that point, because you don't want to, if it's a scathing review of somebody's proposed rules, it doesn't look good for us to be pointing to partisan or some sort of non-neutral source. Same with the spark lines on GovPulse showing which agencies are publishing more. We sort of have to take them out. Like, this isn't necessarily official, but there's a general feeling that we don't want to show that agencies aren't producing these things or give the idea that they're somehow less than a different one.
Because you're not better if you're producing
right.
regulations.
No, exactly. And it's actually super interesting to see that the FBI or something has every now and then post an article, and it's like, why did they post it? They only post like once every 5 years. This might be really important. But there's just weird little political issues that I don't necessarily understand. I think are kind of weak. But
So, plain language. There's been a lot of stuff that comes out that the agencies need to develop a plain language plan. And I have this idea, because the Federal Register has some of the worst plain language examples in the federal government. That's why I love it so much. That somehow you put a rating on there so that people could rate how difficult this was to read or understand. And so, then it's a feed, because it actually talks in the OMB directive. It says you need to have a feedback loop to the agencies about, so they should be able to tell you what is not written using plain language. What are the worst examples? And if I could ding like an agency, and I could say like, hey,
scorecard,
some sort of scorecard per because they're all written by different people, per notice, that'd be awesome.
There's some good linguistic algorithms for that too, just using grade level basically, which is not entirely what you're getting at.
Yeah, no, it's related. Yeah,
but you can automate the premise for that.
Yeah.
Anyhow, there's no beating human readers, but you can get a step at it.
Tomorrow, that's something I've been working on, is the idea of short, thumbs up, a little more than thumbs up, thumbs down. But one page, whether any event, whether it's online or at a meeting or something, that the person can very quickly get a benefit. And you saw when you went to EPA, regulations.gov, you saw the 4C results pop up. They're a survey firm that is hired by EPA and some other agencies too. Like how are we doing? But it's not, and they're still trying to gauge. Did you get what this was about?
Right.
Did you, were you frustrated or were you satisfied? Oh yeah, this is great. I'm so happy I clicked here. And, that's what you're basically doing.
Right.
Yeah. But that's still more of a web type of thing. But there's no standard. There needs to be. There was a standard sheet, and that's what I'm trying to get to. Is maybe 6 questions that could say, did you understand what's going on?
I just want to rate 1 to 5 stars, or maybe it's not stars. Maybe it's
minimum barrier.
Anyway,
readable, not readable.
Readable, not readable. Not
Right,
readable.
that's it.
Did you
we can talk about it more tomorrow, but that's OpenGov metrics is
Cool.
I'll be talking about tomorrow. But get a handle on is this work?
Because the worst offenders need to prove, and the problem is there is right now no feedback loop.
Yeah.
So they can continue to publish incomprehensible stuff, and there's no consequence for it.
That's a great idea. We were kicking around stuff before this, what sort of things we want to talk about. And that feed, using Federal Register as a feedback loop into agencies. We haven't thought of this idea at all, but that was sort of, so I like that.
It's funny because the whole reason for the Federal Register is feedback. But now you're asking, okay, so in asking, in my listening to you, did you feel that I really was listening? So it's kind of like the positive, what's it called? Positive listening. Have you heard that term?
I have not.
You're not married.
thinking
Okay,
of
but
something I
the
should know
idea
as a result.
is, you say, now, you read back to somebody and you say, this is what I heard you say. Say that. You know, so it's more than one pass in any kind of communication. Okay, now I understand what you're talking about. Now I know what kind of wine to buy. Okay, got
So
it.
when my wife told me repeatedly last night, no, it's okay that she's so nauseous she can't get out of bed, it's cool, just go to the conference this weekend, she might not have meant that.
Yeah, I would double check. They give them a second pass, and then they come back in 5 minutes to see if you get the same question again. And they're like, on second thought, I think you should stay home.
Do you guys have a
This is a
sense?
lesson.
Do you have a sense of either your current or sort of ideal audience for this? Like, are people coming to read environmental regulations that are in the field of whatever it is the regulations are, and they come to read it and are experts, or is it like people who randomly perused the Federal Register?
Huge. This is an awesome question, and it's a big unknown. I mean, when we built the site, we have like this whole section functionality. It was supposed to be, you know, more like a newspaper sort of deal for regular people, that we would show them the really important articles, and I think that hasn't really worked out very well.
I think you have the problem that those audiences, the browsing audiences, they were either never created, they never developed because of how it was published, or they were around in like the 40s and 50s,
Yeah.
and everyone,
Right.
no one cares about it anymore, or it was too difficult, the barrier to entry. So those need to be rebuilt. It
Right.
needs to be more of health and
I think the general audience at this point is definitely like people that are experts, or they're like,
They're
it's
like-
their job
and
to
it's like
read this stuff
legal-
and figure it out.
Special interest groups on K Street, they're looking for, and we literally browsed in the 80s when I was working for the Navy. Every day, we get out the Federal Register and look for environment. You know, that would be the key word. Flip, is anybody proposing any environmental regulations that will affect how the Navy facilities? So you go like this, and after a while you go, what am I looking for? But we're a special interest group in that sense. And then you have the National Association of Metal Refiners who want to see, those browsers. John Q. Public is not going. I mean, I never saw. 25 years I lived in D.C. I never saw a Federal Register on anybody's coffee table.
Sure. Like sitting
Nobody
out in the
said,
park.
I have caught up
They
with
needed
this.
to level the table.
Yeah.
I think though that could change because we didn't even talk because we won't have to talk about the design, color, and typography, which is really nice looking.
Thank you.
Super nice.
But I just have to ask one
Super,
question
super
about that
nice.
before I continue with my other question, which is typefaces. You're not using like Typekit, I assume.
Yes, sir.
Seriously,
Yeah, we were one of the
you're
first
using
like
Typekit?
big users, official big.
I'm just
company.
picturing like who puts in their credit card number to pay $99. Well, no, you'd be on the $150 plan, wouldn't you?
It was $99 for a year.
But that's only up to 500,000 page views. And I
Per
assume
month.
you're north-
Yeah.
And you're not north of there?
No, not yet.
I run a
Which is
site
why
that's
we're
more
talking
popular
about
than
like
the
how we
Yeah.
can
register
reach
website.
out people.
Well, anyhow, to return to my initial question, I think you're going to, with this great new look, not the blank one, but the with this great new look, I think you're going to find more people
Yes.
who normally would have stumbled across it, as I'm sure I have in years past, but I'm going back, who can now actually understand it and read it and follow it and weren't frightened by it. In fact, just last week, my wife and I run a small farm and really get a lot more ducks. And we didn't know what the limit was as to how many ducks we could have on the farm before we run into more serious regulations. We could Google for it and find state poultry regulations, which was awesome. 5 years ago, we would have had to hire a lawyer.
Yeah.
It changes stuff for small farmers and businessmen and whoever.
But that's regulations. I mean, you can find, and there's some Code of Federal Regulations on regulations.gov.
The CFR is at FDC.
That's someplace else. So the regulations are someplace else, but regulations.gov is
Just comments.
just
This is all
Federal
part of
Register.
the rulemaking.
Federal Register's notices.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is all
About
part of the
ducks.
rulemaking
We're proposing that
process.
we raise the number.
Time's
of
up.
ducks.
Sure.
CFR is after the fact.
But see, so what you're talking about is stuff information you can use. Where do I find the number of ducks? Not where do I find the proposal to raise the number of ducks so we can talk about it and decide whether it's 10 or 15. Like, I don't care about that.
But
I just want to know how many ducks.
Browsing either.
So
but maybe you're a big duck farmer and you want to be able to
That's
weigh in.
That's the National Association of Really Large Duck. There's not too many people. That's definitely a special interest group.
That's for the
I
Senate.
do want to point out we just launched Monday the new email functionality. So if you haven't seen that yet and you do use the Federal Register, you can do any search on the site and subscribe to the results feed.
Yeah.
So
Or the whole issue,
you can
or
do it
agencies,
entirely
sections,
30
So you go
item
to a
content.
particular
So
request
under
for
the search-
proposal,
Well, or
for
so like,
comment.
if you cared about the ducks, you could have it email you whenever someone posts.
Whatever
Yep.
any rule
So
mentions.
is it on the search results?
Yep.
It's on
Anywhere
search.
you can subscribe to a feed,
You
you
can
can get
subscribe to
an
agencies, you can subscribe
If you find
to
problems with emails,
topics. So we've just kind of released that the past few days and haven't.
you can email a friend articles now.
Not your zip
New York
code.
Times.
Can I ask
Which
you,
is fun to-
I came in late.
There's
Are you guys hired by the Federal Register to redo it? Is that what's going on here?
Yeah, so the really short story is we built a site called govpulse.us. And it still runs. It's similar content, but nowhere near as good as the new Federal Register site. We built that about a year and a half ago for a Summit Labs contest. About 6 months later, we got a phone call from the OFR saying, hey, we're thinking about redoing our site. Thank you.
Redo it.
Would you guys be interested in talking to us about that? So we ended up being signing a contract to do that last summer.
Sunlight actually helped get that going then, right?
Yeah, it was their contest that really,
Wow, cool.
we first found out about open data, federal government stuff, and so yeah, it's a really cool, it's a fun open government story in that.
Yeah.
But you literally are contracting to OFR, which is part of that?
Yeah.
All right.
It's
But you're
So we're like second or third contractors, like, in a government.
Any sort of
Yeah.
source authorized data.
Like you guys commission something and then
But
the
yeah,
government
we
looks at it
essentially,
and
we
goes, "Oh,
spend,
that's better than
I spend about 2 days a week working on the site. These guys spend about 2 days a week.
Here, that happened with you.
We're not sure when our budget is.
And then how much flexibility you have? Right? Say you wanted to put in, have all the content in everyday Federal Register, get it read by extra normal characters. What kind of, how does that relationship work? What you can do and what they request?
We essentially meet with them once a week.